Hey everybody, welcome to the live stream. I'm really glad to be doing this. Haven't done many live streams in a while, so really glad to be doing this today. Yeah, if you're watching this live, as always, it's really cool to see people come in and say hi. Drop something in chat so that I know that you can hear me well, you can see me well before I start presenting. I see a lot of people joining. Really happy to see you guys. Usually, I ask people to just let us know where you are joining us from. I'm streaming from London. Curious to learn where you are this evening and also what you do for a living, so what your profession is. Yeah, glad to see that everything is working. Cool. Yeah, I see people commenting. Great. So everything is working. Yeah, welcome to the webinar. Today we're going to be talking about the UK Global Talent Visa and how you can get it in 2024. Obviously, this year is coming to a close. So I wanted to make it a bit future oriented and provide you information to help you prepare for the visa yourself if you are going to do it on your own. So most of this webinar, I would say 98% of it will be just information that will help you prepare. Then towards the end, I will talk about my services as a coach and how I can help you get the visa and increase the chances of you getting it. So if you don't like sales in webinars, you are free to skip the end of this conversation. But there will be a nice offer, limited time offer for people who watch it until the end. So if you're curious about working with me, but there was always some concern with the cost, then I really think that it's worth watching towards the end. Yeah, I see more people joining. Hi, everybody. See people joining from India, an iOS engineer. Somebody watching from London. Amazing. So yeah, I'll start with some intros for people who don't know me, and also I do assume that you're seeing my slides. So if you don't see the slides, please let me know. For those who are new here, if this is the first time you're watching one of my webinars, welcome. Thank you for joining. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you're into the topic of immigration to the UK. So who am I? I'm Nadia. I have done a lot of different things, and probably this is still not the last thing that I do. So currently I'm a startup founder, but also I'm a UK Global Talent Visa coach, which is most relevant for this conversation. In the past, I also worked as a journalist, a translator, an author, programmer, DevRel, and a career coach. So I've done a bunch of things. I received the UK Global Talent Visa as a software engineer in 2022. I did the whole preparation myself, so I didn't have any lawyers or coaches to help me or guide me. So I do know from experience what this journey is like. So my heart goes out to everybody who's doing this on your own because I do remember how lonely and difficult it was. But was very glad to receive the visa, the endorsement last year. And basically, since then, I've been helping people get endorsed. I should be taking keeping the record of how many people I've helped, but it's a lot. And I have helped people of various professions. So I would say that mostly it's been software engineers, but also a lot of designers, product managers, people on the business side of things, marketers, data analysts, QA engineers, startup founders, and people in various corporate roles. But this is not an exhaustive list, right? So if you work in tech and if you're interested in this visa, potentially I will be able to help you. So if you don't see your job in this list, it doesn't mean that I can't help you. Most probably I can. So this slide I have from my previous webinar, it basically shows some of the things that I've done. So you can see my book on the left, which is still available. Then you can see my YouTube channel, which you are watching now, obviously, and then a bunch of publications and podcasts that I have done over the years. So this slide kind of shows a snippet of what I do and like my interests and where I've been engaged, but also I think it's a nice idea of what things you can choose to use in your global talent visa application. So for instance, I used a lot of those evidences in my application as well. So this is a bit meta, but basically if you have media mentions and you have done things that have been captured online in some form, this I think is this I hopefully gives you some kind of idea of what you can use. Also, a good way to see what exists about you is just to Google your name, and if you Google my name, you will see this and also a bunch of other stuff as well. Yeah, so as I said before, I really would love to this to be interactive, so please say hi in chat. Feel free to ask questions. I usually answer questions towards the end, but I think this will be a long live stream, so probably I will answer them during the show as well, unless I plan to cover them further down the road. So please make sure to ask questions. My rule is to not give out free consultations, so the live stream, the webinar, is really the only way to get free advice from me. So I think it's wise to use it if you're interested and if you have questions. Cool. Yeah. So also I do suggest that you have something to write in. So either a document on your computer or a piece of paper, because I wanted this to be really more of a workshop for you so that you don't just listen while I'm talking, but you also do something actively. You write things down. And then by the end of this live stream, you will have something concrete in your hands. So you will have some notes and ideas that you can use potentially for your preparation for the visa. If you have already started working on your visa prep, you can still maybe get some new ideas. If you're just thinking about it, then you can treat this as some of your prep. And if you're already working with somebody, maybe you will get more ideas of how to improve your documents. So do recommend that you write things down. So yeah, just saying hi to people in chat. Hello, glad to see you join. Thank you so much for saying hello. There was actually one question that came in already. Do you have any insights what the acceptance rate now is for the global talent visa? Not promise. I don't have any data on that since I'm not associated with Technation, and I can't talk about the acceptance rate. But what I can say is that it has become obviously much harder to get the visa, especially the talent endorsement. I think promise is still a bit easier. And things have changed since March 2023, sorry. And I will be talking about the reasons why people get rejected a bit later today. So if you're curious, you can hang longer and see it later. But also, I didn't mention it, but this webinar will be recorded on YouTube. So if you have to go or something like this, you can rewatch it later at your own space. At your own pace, sorry. Cool. Okay, so why is the visa the best visa? I would say that probably if you're watching this, you're aware, but just to reiterate for people who are maybe new to this, the biggest benefit of the visa is the freedom that it gives you. So you don't need to have a job, you don't need to have any kind of employer to sponsor you, or you sponsor this visa for yourself. And then once you have it, you're your own boss, you're your own sponsor, so you can do whatever you want. You can work for a big company in the UK, you can work for, a startup that doesn't have the license to sponsor. You can be self-employed, which a lot of people do when they switch to this visa. So, if you're self-employed, you can work for a foreign employer, for instance, remotely for an employer in the United States, and then here you're just registered as a sole trader and you pay taxes here. And then there are other opportunities for employment. There is so much flexibility that is pretty much impossible with a lot of other visas. So also you can have your own company, you can study, or you can also choose to take a break from work or from studying and just take a gap year or something like this. So you're very much free to do nothing at all on this visa, which frankly appeals to a lot of people who are overworked and who have spent a lot of time working nonstop. I'm very curious to hear if we have people watching this on skilled worker visa or just experience with skilled worker visa. Because when I was on skilled worker visa myself, I do remember this constant stress and worry that I had about being on this visa, about being dependent on my employer. And I know that a lot of people feel the same stress and this kind of pressure that you have to always be working. If you lose your job, you have to find a new job very quickly with a skilled worker and sponsored visas. And it's just not a way to live, basically, right? So I think the global talent visa gives you a lot of opportunities, a lot of freedom, a lot of flexibility. I would say that for me, it has transformed my experience living in the UK because it allowed me to run businesses, and I have two right now, which obviously would not be possible otherwise. So I'm very grateful for this opportunity, and for me, it's really exciting to help others achieve the same level of freedom. I'm very happy to see when my former clients quit their corporate jobs on LinkedIn and they start their own businesses and their own ventures. I think it's really amazing to see. Nothing against working in the corporate environment, but a lot of people have the dream of building their own businesses, and I'm happy to be part of it. So, big fan of the visa, obviously. Um, we had actually an interesting comment here. So Rajesh here is applying for endorsement soon. Anyone interested in buddying up with applying endorsement? So really interesting to see what buddying up in this context means. But very happy to see people connecting. So feel free to connect, and hopefully this can help you as well. Yeah, well, already we see somebody interested, so that's something. So the live stream connected a couple of people. Glad to hear. Um, there was another question. Um, so yeah, so basically, if you're in the UK on a skilled worker visa, you are able to switch to the global talent visa. You don't convert the visa, but you switch to a new visa. This is what I've done. A lot of people do it as well. So it's entirely possible. But within my role, I only advise on the endorsement stage for the global talent visa. I can't advise on the any other immigration topics or issues. Yeah, and one thing that I forgot to mention is that the visa allows you to get permanent residency and a passport in a very kind of straightforward fashion, right? So there are like rules that you need to follow, but honestly, you can read them on gov.uk. They're pretty straightforward. You need to live in the UK, pay taxes, and observe certain rules, such as how many days a year you are in the country, and there are some other things around that. But it's quite straightforward, and I think a lot of people really appreciate the opportunity to get the passport and to get the permanent residence at least. And the global talent visa allows you to do that, which I think is pretty great. And you also don't need to know English or have a lot of money to get the visa. Well, technically it's true, but I still think that like they don't ask you to show that you have a lot of money, but also you do need to pay a lot to get the visa processed, and then especially for the healthcare surcharge, that's I think the biggest lump. So maybe this slide didn't age so well since they increased the health surcharge payments by 66%. Anyway, still like technically it's an advantage. Okay, so can you get it? I think a lot of it, the answer is as always, it depends. So there are a lot of things that you need to consider to understand whether you can get it or not. So the source of truth for understanding whether you are eligible for endorsement is the Technation Visa Guide. So if you Google Technation Visa Guide, you will find it. This is the place you need to consult for anything related to the visa. This guide is regularly updated, so the rules change, which means that anything that you see online, whether it's from me or from somebody else, you have to double check that it's still up to date with this one. And this is where you will learn all the latest updates about the visa and what it entails. So yeah, who can get the visa? I think we're getting some questions about whether whether somebody's eligible or not. So just to clarify, this webinar is only about the digital technology industry, and this is currently the only field where I consult. I did explore consulting people in the arts and culture space, but I don't currently do that. So if you work in digital technology in any role, which is, can be tech or can be business, then I would be able to help you. For other endorsement bodies and other fields, I think it's best to search for information elsewhere. Um, Actually, a very interesting question from Yana. I'll actually answer it now. So, do you think, thank you for watching, do you think there might be any potential problems uh, from with switching from a skilled worker to a global talent visa? Can your current employer be against it? So I don't think I've never heard of any potential problems. I've never heard of an employer being against this transition. Um, there are, my usual advice is to be upfront with your employer. Like, most likely you will need letters of recommendation from them, right? So they will probably be aware of the fact that you're applying for the visa. Sometimes people don't notify their employers when they're going through this process if they don't get their letters of recommendation. But then once you get the endorsement and you apply for switching the visa, you do need to tell them and to warn them that you are doing this. Um, what happens then is that sometimes with the bigger companies, their employers will reimburse their employees for the healthcare surcharge um, that was paid, because if you're I'm not sure again if you're sponsored or not, but like, if your employer sponsored your visa initially, they paid all of those charges themselves, right? And when you apply for the global talent visa, you pay them again, which is amazing because you pay twice, and then after a period of time, the exact length of time can be confirmed on gov.uk. The person or the organization that paid for their health insurance first, they will get the reimbursement back from the government. So it means that your employer will be reimbursed. And what happens then kind of depends on the employer. So some employers actually reimburse their employees for this surcharge, and some don't. So this, I think, is up to your employer and you to negotiate and to ask. But overall, I don't think that should be a problem for an employer. So yeah, they're normally not against that at all. Okay. So there was okay. So the money they paid will be paid for nothing. Yeah, so yeah, exactly. They will get the money back. So they will get some of the costs back. Not everything, obviously, but the biggest chunk of it. But in any case, I haven't heard anybody complain about it. I've heard another version, which I think should be verified as well, that for some employers, it's beneficial for you to be on this visa. But this is just something I have heard. I haven't confirmed it. So please just, take this with a grain of salt and verify it. But generally, I think you should be fine. There was another question. How about data analyst? So yeah, just about to talk about it, right? So who can get the visa? So this is a list of technical skills or roles that you can apply with and you can get the visa with. So you can see there is a lot there. There is, DevOps, data scientists, data engineers, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and then, there will be front end, back end, and then it's kind of a random mishmash of skills and then technologies, which I think is a bit strange. But anyway, it should give you some idea. But also, there is a separate list of business skills. You can see here that there are, solution sales experts, product managers, sales leadership, VC, performance marketing experts, VC analysts, sorry. So what those lists mean is that they're not really comprehensive, right? So these are not all of the professions that can get the visa. This is just to give you some sort of idea of who can get it. So if you don't find your profession on this list, it does mean that you can't get the visa, because the guide was not meant to be like a list of all the professions. The field changes very rapidly, and there are professions that didn't exist some time ago, right, and that appeared. So I would say that from I've helped a lot of people who had professions that were not on this list. To your specific question about data analyst, I actually helped a few data analysts. I have an interview with a data analyst on my YouTube channel. So if you go to my live streams and you search for data analyst, you'll find an interview with Tanya, who was my client, who was a data analyst and got the visa. And then I also helped a data scientist, which is a different profession, but somewhat, some might say somewhat related. So you can check them out as well. But definitely, there is a possibility there as well. Okay, yeah. So let us know in the chat or write it down. What is your main business or technical skill? So I guess here we learned that Balagun is a data analyst. Who else is here? Let me know. I think I've only heard that somebody was iOS engineer. Um, Let me know who is watching this in terms of skills. ML, UX, amazing. Yeah, I've coached UX researcher as well. Another profession that's not on the list, but is definitely eligible. Um, yeah, engineers, backend engineer. Oh, DevRel, very cool. I've coached one DevRel while I was a DevRel, so that was cool. Definitely a profession that's not on the list. Also, I've coached one developer evangelist, which is somewhat related profession. Somebody might say the same. Um, IT support. For IT support, also you can look at my channel, and there is an interview with an IT support engineer. Marketing, again, have helped somebody in marketing, front end, energy system optimization, simulation, and AI engineer. Very cool. All right. So there's a question from Rashad from the industrial automation field. Perhaps you could share more information about what exactly you do, what kind of company you work at, so that I can give more information on this. And then the next slide is about people who are not eligible. I think mostly what's most important here is consultants. And it's a complicated topic. Can you get the visa if you worked in consultancies? If you read the guide, you would see that consultancy experience is not eligible, but then in reality, you would find people who have consultant experience who've got the visa. A lot of it depends on what kind of consultant experience you've had, how it was presented. So from technicians' rejections, we know that if your experience was within a niche boutique small agency where you were providing services that are hard to find on the and your skills are hard to find on the open market, then potentially there can be made a case for you to present a case in a way that would make technician happy. But then I would say that for some people who work in consultancies but who are more focused on product work, for instance, they were able to get the visa successfully as well. But then I think it was very important to show that they worked on a specific product for a long period of time, right? So there are cases where people they're employed by a consultancy, but what they really do is they are embedded with a product team for years, for instance, right? And they're building the product within the product company. So it's a complicated issue, and definitely a product experience is much more straightforward to describe and to present well. So I would say that it's hard to answer a question about. I think there was a question about consultancies somewhere in chat. I don't see it anymore. But for more specific situations that are related to you, and to your experience, I would really encourage you to get in touch with me directly so we can discuss your experience in detail. On this channel, on this webinar, and on general my webinars, I try not to answer questions that are specific to somebody's experience. Why? Because first of all, it's probably not very interesting to everybody else who's watching. But second, it's not really a conversation, right? It's one way. I just see, a sentence from somebody, and then I really don't feel comfortable giving advice without getting all the information. It's very easy to give incorrect advice. So I try to be very wary of that. So yeah, for complex questions, and if you want me to help you determine whether you're eligible at all or not, but you work in digital technology and you have tech experience, then I do encourage you to get in touch directly, and I'll be more than happy to help you. So yeah, product consultancy, I don't know how useful this is, but generally, if the main source of income for your or revenue for your company is actually making and selling a digital product, then you can say that most likely your company is product. And then if your company is building products for somebody else and then signing off the IP to them, then it's most likely consultancy. So that's generally the distinction. But to be honest, I think people generally know what kind of company they work at. And then, sometimes it's a question of, okay, so what do I do with this experience? Do I just throw it out? I would encourage you to, like, each case is very different. It's very hard to give generic advice here I think with cases where somebody just has 3 product companies in their experience, then it's very easy. I would say that, okay, you can use experience from all of those companies. But then the question with where it's less straightforward, I think it's more complicated. So again, consultancies are trickier, and just, I guess the summary is just get in touch and I'll see whether I can help or not. But yeah, so I think it would be nice if this was enough just to have the experience. Unfortunately, there is much more than you need to do. I have a lot of people who come to me for discovery call, and I'll talk about discovery later, where we look at their experience and they have the experience, so they have the years that they have worked in product companies, but unfortunately, it's not enough, right? So it's not enough just to have the it's not enough just to have the experience, right? You also have to meet the criteria. Let me know, people in the chat. One question that I forgot to ask is, where are you in your cycle of preparation for the visa? Are you okay? I have a cat chewing on my microphone. Sorry. Where are you in your cycle of preparation for the visa? Are you just starting out? Are you already preparing your documents? Maybe you already tried applying. It's curious for me because then I will know much better what kind of level of detail that I need to provide for you when it comes to criteria. On my channel, I do have a tutorial, which is a separate playlist where you can learn more about the criteria in a lot of detail. So there are ways to learn about them definitely on this channel as well. Okay, so evidence gathering process and trying to get recommendations, I guess recommendation letters. So that's really good. I think this webinar will be useful for you as well, because I will also talk briefly about mistakes that you can make in the application. But also, if you go to my live streams on my YouTube channel, you will see my previous live stream 2 months ago was called UK Global Talent Visa, Why You Will Get Rejected. Very provocative. I do recommend watching this before you submit your application, or better, while you're still working on it. Thinking about applying next year, that's actually good, because this gives you enough time to prepare, but also if you are missing some evidence, you can potentially get it you can maybe do something else for your external profile. Okay, so we have somebody else, evidence gathering, and then discovery phase. I think this is especially useful at the discovery phase because then you will probably save a lot of time, hopefully, pursuing some dead ends, uh, and run as well evidence gathering, right? Great. So yeah, promise versus talent. It's basically a distinction that is important if you are new to tech, right? So if you have fewer than 5 years in tech, then you might be able to apply for the promise. So it's a promising leader or like emergent leader category. If you have over 5 years in tech, then you have to apply for talent. The requirements, if you read the guide, they are similar. They are, very similar, but then I would say that the expectations are a bit different. And then there are some differences in the requirements. They're subtle. But also, I think once you have seen enough evidences and enough cases, you would see that there is a big difference between the level of proof that you have to submit if you're applying for talent versus if you're applying for promise. So I would say that for people who can apply for promise, it's good news because then the expectations are lower. So, and I feel like the rejection rate seems to be lower as well. Again, not based on data, just from experience. Um, the difference of the visas is that you can apply for permanent residency faster with talent, so it's 3 years, and with promise it's 5. But that's about it. There are no other limitations on the visa. Uh, are you applying for promise or talent, or let me know in the chat whether you're still undecided. And then there was another answer. Thinking if preparing the case to get global talent and then getting a one visa for the United States. Interesting plan. Kind of having a plan B sort of visa. So there was a quick question. Can I use a company that has closed but has digital footprints for my evidence? Yeah, definitely. I've had people successfully use those kind of evidences in my experience, but try not to build like all of your case on one company, because I think it's always best to have variety. Um, I think the answer depends on why did it close. um, if it was a startup that failed, then the question is how convincing this would look like if you're building a lot of your case on the idea that you contributed a lot to the success of the company and then it doesn't exist anymore. So I think there are ways to present it, but just be mindful of how it looks, right? And if you can still make a good case and present the evidence in a convincing way. But yeah, the short answer is yes, you can. But you see that it's very hard to answer any questions here briefly because it's always it depends. A lot of factors, a lot of details, a lot of nuances that I have to keep in mind. So apologize, if I don't cover like every aspect of every question. I don't think it's possible in this format, but I do my best. Okay, so we have people applying for promise, talent, talent, and talent. Great. Amazing. So yeah, the first criteria, which is probably the most important one, is the mandatory. When I do my discovery sessions, I usually try to give people a keyword to remember. If you think about the criteria, you have to have some sort of mental model of like what it has, like what it does. So mandatory is about leadership, right? So whether you have been recognized as an emerging leader in digital technology in the last 5 years, which is for for promise, right? Emergent part. And then for talent, it's just as a leader. So the question that I usually get is, how do I show that I have been recognized as a leader? Like, what is leadership? And I think here, one way would be to just go by the technician guide. It gives you some ideas of documents that you can use. But to be honest, I myself, when I was going through the guide and applying for the visa on my own, I didn't find it that helpful. I think that some things there are confusing, and I do wish that they would update the guide at some point and just remove things that no longer work. So I'll try to fill this gap with this webinar. Hopefully this will make sense for you, but if it doesn't, you can ask me questions, or come for consultations and we can discuss in more detail. But these are some ideas of the evidence pieces that you can use. So some are based on the guide, some are based on my experience, and then on experience of others. You don't have to show all of those things, but typically people will have around 3 or 4 evidence pieces for the mandatory criteria, right? So if you're just new to the process, you would get 10 slots to upload up to 10 documents to support your criteria. And the way people usually separate them would be 4 documents for the mandatory and then 3 documents for each of the optional. You've got 2 optional criteria, so it's 10 in total. So for mandatory, usually you would have around 4 evidence pieces or 3. And these are some of the things that you can use. So some of the documents that you can use would describe how you led the growth or the marketing of a product company, which can be represented by separate, reference letters, publications, and any other external proof of success of the thing. So they can be, mentions in media or conference talks that mention your product or something like this, right? Then a lot of people also use documents related to growing a tech-focused NGO. So again, this can be a letter backed by something external. I wanted to stress that it's not enough just to have letters for any of those documents. So make sure that you have something else supporting a piece of evidence. So here, for instance, if you're active in an NGO or some voluntary organization where you help the organization grow, or you participate in some trainings for volunteers or something, you can use that. Then open source is something that can potentially be applied to many criteria, which you can see in the guide. But if you have history of open source contributions, potentially it can be used as well. Please note that it doesn't mean that you can use any open source that you have as proof of mandatory. It's a bit more involved than that, but generally open source is something that can be used. Awards and hackathons are often used for mandatory as well. Awards, they sound intimidating, but in reality, being included in some list or like online contest or winning something like this, winning an online award is also considered. And the same with hackathons, right? This can be various hackathons on various levels, but they can be useful as well. Then there is public speaking, which is supposed to be during high profile specialist events for your field with a significant audience. Then media mentions in industry publications. So this can be interviews with you, or like your quotes being mentioned in blogs, YouTube, podcasts, newspapers. I've had a client who had TV interviews. Those things, they don't have to be in English, they can be in your native language. So this doesn't matter. There are, specific ways how you can format them, but generally, anything that mentions your name, where you're quoted, this is all very good. Then thought leadership, it's basically anything that shows that you're an opinion leader and that you share your knowledge with the world and the world listens and cares. So this can be articles, this can be books, basically anything that is pre-moderated, right? So there is often a question that I get asked whether I can use my Medium blog or something like this. So the answer is no. technician wants to see moderation, right? So that they want to see that somebody actually read your article and approved it, and this is important. But also important part is the audience size, how many people read this publication, or how many people specifically read your article. And sometimes people are able to use actually their own personal blogs successfully, but they have to be blogs that are very popular in the industry. Then being a judge and being, participating in panels is also one recognition of leadership. And then the last one is about high salary. This one I feel like I should almost remove from the slide, but I will mention it since it's always asked, it's always been discussed, it's still in the guide. But honestly, at this point, I don't. I it come to the point where I don't even advise my clients to use this salary doc if they can avoid it, if they have something better. It's the weakest kind of evidence that you can submit. Technician is no longer impressed by high salary. So, and also, like, to me, it has always been a bit strange that high salary proves leadership. Like, I can see some logic in it, but I think now at this point, high salary doesn't really do it, in the application. Like, if you have like exceptionally high salary that is just, not even top 1%, but even higher, then yeah, maybe it can do something for your case. But the number of rejections that I've seen where they specifically mention your salary has not been impressive, I think it's pretty overwhelming at this point. So yeah, just bear in mind that the salary, it's kind of a thing of the past. It's very 2022, I would say. So yeah, this is my opportunity to take a break from talking for 30 seconds, and I'll be curious to hear what kind of evidence that you have from the previous slide that you wanted to use. So you can just share, if you have open source, you can just write open source. If you have a hackathon, you can write hackathon, panel, or something else that you have. Always curious to see what people have prepared already. All right, so there are actually a lot of great questions, but I will talk about related topics in a bit when I talk about the second criteria, so an NGO, and then when I talk about the third criteria as well. So maybe I can return to them just in a bit. Um, so this question, I have some YouTube videos for getting consent of Google OAuth to introduce in our application. Not sure I understand what those videos are, so I would have to look at them and determine whether they can be used or not. Open source, that's really good. Then judge at FA Awards counts in the digital field. I'm spacing out a bit. What are FA Awards? Marketing, right? Yeah, I would need to look into what the awards are. If they're a marketing award, then basically the question that you need to answer, and let's make this as generic as possible. If your question is whether it's applicable, then ask yourself, does this have any relation to digital technology? Does this award or does this judging opportunity prove that you are actually a leader in digital technology? And if you can make a convincing case, then yes, then you can use it. If not, then probably not. Probably technician won't be convinced as well. So guest speaker in a university, that's interesting one. I would say that like a year ago, I would say that definitely a great piece of evidence for the mandatory. But then this year, I actually had somebody who I helped somebody who submitted similar type of evidence for mandatory, and this wasn't accepted as proof of leadership. So I guess the context here again, I would need more context to determine whether this is enough for mandatory or not. And also just note that some things they might be not enough on their own, but then combined with other appearances or other things that you do, they would be more convincing and just look better, right? So very important to look at this holistically at the whole application. Okay, so this one, I have been a judge for hackathons twice and have spoken at GDG Dev Fest. Yeah, this is definitely something um, that would be applicable here. So speaking at the conference is just the best evidence that you can get for this one. um, so I have several awards in RoboCup since 2014 to 2018. I can just use the 2018 certificate, not older ones. Yeah, actually, the point of the application is to focus on the last 5 years. So make sure that you don't use any older evidences, which is to say that in your CV you can mention the older evidences as well. But if you have your separate evidence pieces, just make sure they focus on the newer ones. And technician is very strict about the date. So it's already December almost. So even the document from 2018 is kind of getting stale. So make sure that you are still within the limit. It's really important they do watch it. So a question about consultancy shouldn't be mentioned at all. If a consultancy platform features you among their experts, it feels like it adds some weight to you as an expert. Mm, yeah, I think it's tricky. So I think here I would need to look at like what the consultancy platform is, why they feature you, like how were you chosen there, like what is the significance of it, like how hard it is to get there, and also the question is like how does this really show a recognition. So I would feel that here I would need to look at the concrete situation here as well. All right. Okay, so we've covered this one. Yeah, so the publications outside of work contributions within the 5 years frame as well. So I always try to focus the whole application on the last 5 years so that everything is consistent. The idea here is to not just follow the guide to the letter, but to make sure that it all looks believable together, that it's all consistent, and that it all makes sense. So I would say that they want to see what you have done in the last 5 years, and I would focus the application on that. Like sometimes, occasionally, people would throw in something that happened earlier, right? That is very, very important. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I think it depends on what else is in your application, right? So I would be more careful with the documents from older. Okay, lots of good questions today. Some of them I'll address later when we come to the second criteria. So let's talk about the innovation. So innovation is a criteria which has kind of a bad name. There is this idea that you can only get innovation if you have a patent, if you have like a registered invention, if you're an inventor. But it's not. It hasn't really been the case in my experience. So I've helped quite a few people actually fulfill this criteria, and none of them had patents. Actually, maybe just one person had more recently. Yeah. So they did have inventions, like registered inventions, but still we were able to make a convincing case for it. They were all employees in innovative companies and innovative fields. So on my channel, you can find interviews with, if you look for client stories, you will see a couple of interviews there. I think the latest interviews, they would be about innovation. But basically with innovation, you have to explain why is this thing that you have built innovative, why it's unique, how does it fare against the industry, what was your specific role in this innovation. So you have to show that you were driving the innovation. You have to show proof of innovation in the market. So, with revenue, projected growth, capital raised, and sales. So it's proof of the product being in market, like on its own. Of course, revenue, projected growth, it doesn't prove innovation, right? The fact that a thing made money doesn't mean that it was new, right? Lots of really old, boring things make a lot of money. Then you really have to explain why this was an innovative thing. So sometimes people do this with media mentions that describe this thing being innovative. Sometimes people use reference letters where industry leaders that have some authority talk about this thing being innovative. Then innovation grants, awards, R&D tax breaks are sometimes used. So I've had clients whose startup was maybe accepted to an accelerator that is called like the most innovative accelerator in whatever country. Then things like that, they can sometimes work. Honestly, it's a very tricky criteria. I don't like I why like there are you can find tests and questionnaires online where you fill out an application and it says you have a chance to get the visa or you can't. I try not to do that. I think every case is very different, and I have sometimes taken on cases that were just very strange and used very weird documents, but that were endorsed eventually, right? So I've become more open-minded about what you can and what you cannot achieve with this visa. I would say with innovation, like you really have to be able to make a convincing case to somebody with some understanding of technology that your thing is innovative. Uh, you can't take something that is old and not interesting and pretend that it's innovative just by having letters say that it's innovative. Technician assessors, they have understanding of like the latest trends, innovative fields and concepts, right? So you have to believe in it and you have to convince them so that they agree as well. So with innovative ideas and inventions, I would be very curious to hear whether you have some ideas of whether your products or projects were innovative or not. And if you can share them in chat, I think it will be cool to hear as well. But I think here it will be very difficult for me, and I will not even try to say whether this thing that you describe is innovative or not. So, just for context, when I do discovery sessions where I try to determine your eligibility, I spend 75 minutes like deep diving into your experience. And before you send me the documents that you already have, like your CV or your publications or whatever, and I really have to dig deep into your experience to even give you an idea of whether you're eligible or not, right? So you can see the difference. I think a lot of people, a lot of my colleagues in the space offer like shorter calls, like 15 minutes free calls to determine eligibility. I have tried like everything, and I have found that 75 minutes is the bare minimum that I need. Sometimes it goes over to 90 minutes. Um, but it takes time to understand like how your experience lines up, right? Especially if it's not straightforward. So with innovation, sometimes it's the only chance to get the visa, to choose this criteria. If you can't choose any other of the criteria, you have to go with innovation. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But like I think that it saved a lot of people, this criteria. So it's very vague and weird, but maybe it can be done for you as well. So curious to hear whether there are any thoughts on innovation at all or not. Probably not, it's too mysterious. There was a question about digital marketing coach and team lead for a group of realtors. Not really sure how it's related to tech, so maybe you can You can explain, is this a real estate agency, or like you have to be able to explain how you work in digital technology, and if you don't, then this is not applicable. So ADP list will be covered in a second, but I can tell you now. Generally, with mentorship, your mentorship has to be within a structured, organized program with selection criteria for mentors. So ADP list is generally not applicable. It used to work in the past. It doesn't work anymore. Specifically, technician has answered in their rejections that we don't accept this anymore, and it just doesn't work. So unfortunately, you can't build your second criteria just based on that. Can someone who has been working for over 12 months as a contractor, software engineer at product leading company apply? So the question is whether you can meet the criteria if you only have 12 months of experience, right? Um, I think it's best to, like, you need to ask yourself a question whether, like, I have, also it's not really clear whether it's the whole entire experience in tech or not. So again, that's why very hard to answer specific questions, and I'm not sure why I still try to do that. um, okay, so solid evidence for innovation. Yeah, so basically I think I've answered it. So on the previous slide, so people use media mentions, R&D grants, accelerators, being accepted in an accelerator that is, innovative, that focuses on innovative projects is one thing. Then sometimes people have media mentions of them saying that, hey, this product is the only product of its kind in the space. Something like this. What else? Awards for being innovative, things like that. So it's hard to prove this, right? You have to have both the latter. You have to have proof that you worked on this thing and that you led the innovation, but then also you have to have external proof of this, being innovative. And Ron, if you are thinking about this criteria, I'll be happy to talk about this in more detail, privately, one-on-one. So is it an overkill to search for some leading experts approved for the algorithm that I have invented? So I would not say that it's an overkill. I've actually helped somebody who had applied for innovation with an innovative algorithm that they created. So it was an innovative way to use a couple of algorithms together, and they actually used letters from an expert, a computer science expert, who was able to confirm that this was an innovative algorithm. So definitely, it's one thing that you can use there. Um, do you have the question is, do you have other ways to prove that it's innovative? If not, then you do need to have an expert say that it is an invention. So if you are just doing the research within what seems like innovative, you won't be able to prove in anything, right? So I think here the question is whether you would be able to make a convincing case that you are the leader in this innovation. It very much depends on the role in the company. I've talked to people where their role as a UX researcher was, where as a UX researcher they found a problem, they came up with an innovative solution and they created a plan for it, and then they drove the implementation as a UX researcher. So there it's obviously that they were the driver for the innovation. I think in some cases it won't really work, so it depends on whether you can prove that without you this innovation would not happen or something like this. Okay, so I don't think this was a question. Oh, probably you're watching with the lag, right? So this is probably an answer to my previous slide. So this is actually great for mandatory. So you have two awards, one national award from work, team effort, have a personal award gotten from non-day to work activity. So be careful with work. awards, they are not really eligible. They're not applicable for the mandatory criteria. They're looking for things outside of work, right? So if you're like employee of the month, it's not really what they're looking for. So can my speaking engagement as a keynote speaker at a STEM event for a foundation focused on STEM be used under the speaking engagement criteria? Yeah, I think depends on whether you can make a case that this was a very important event for the industry, like how many people were there. Can you make a case that this was a major event, like for the technology industry? But speaking engagements that are relevant to tech, they should probably all be in your application. The question is whether the stuff that you have is enough, right? And the only way to answer whether it's enough is to look at everything. All right, so I'm getting some more comments, but please, if you're writing a comment, just ask a question if you have a question, because otherwise I'm not sure whether it's a question or just somebody sharing. All right, so yeah, so here we'll talk. I think I will scroll back and answer some of the questions that I skipped. So, second criteria is the recognition for work outside of occupation, work that advances the field of technology. So, this is the quote unquote volunteering criteria. So, you have your 9 to 5 where you are driving growth at a product led company, ideally. And then after work or on weekends, you also do other things to help others in tech in some shape or form. There are ideas for what you can use here. So this is, again, open source. Stack Overflow, like Stack Overflow, it doesn't mean it has to be Stack Overflow. It can be forums. It can be Telegram chats or Facebook groups where you help people, where you share information, you share knowledge. All of those things can be potentially used as well. Mentoring, I did share about mentoring a few minutes ago. So mentoring has to be done within an organized program with a curriculum with selection criteria for mentors. So you can imagine that platforms like ADP they don't really fit the bill here, because it's more like ad hoc mentoring, right? So make sure that the mentoring that you provide is within this category. Then there is the community work. So this can be organizing, moderating communities where people learn something technical. So it can be anything at all, but within the context of tech. Advising startups is what a lot of people use for this criteria as well. Teaching, which has to be done for free as well. So people teach at universities or like boot camps. It's also something that can be used. Then being a member of a professional association or a club, and then being active in it and contributing to it, sharing knowledge, organizing something within that club are also really useful and a great way to prove the second criteria. And then talks and opinion pieces, they, again, this is something that I mentioned for the mandatory, and it's not a mistake. Those things are really, those kind of evidences, they can sometimes be applied to mandatory, sometimes to the second criteria. This is more like implementation details that will depend on your specific case, but if you have talks, if you have articles, then just gather them and don't lose them. And then volunteering for tech causes. Volunteering is really useful for this criteria, doing something purpose driven. It has to be volunteering for technology related causes, right? So it can't be volunteering for something else, like, I don't know, refugee or something with the environment, right? So it has to be related to tech. So if you're, for instance, volunteering as a coding teacher for refugees, then it's great. If you're gathering clothes for refugees, then it's not what they are looking for in this particular endorsement process, right? So be aware of like what kind of volunteering you use. Traditional question: what kind of evidences do you have from the previous slide? I think a couple of people already shared. I'll wait for your responses. I'll scroll back to look at your previous questions, and then I want to take a short break just to get some tea, because usually I this kind of webinar lasts for 2 hours, and then I'm just dead by the end of it. So I want to prevent that. Okay, let's see what we had before. This one, yes. So tutoring and NGO definitely can be used for a second criteria. Let me answer this question before I forget. So Bianca asked whether if I'm applying under optional criteria 3, impact growth, would these documents compete with my mandatory documents of proven leading growth at a product company? So we'll talk about the third criteria in a bit after my break. Uh, but when you ask about compete, so basically, I guess the question really is whether like the same document can be used for both criteria, or like similar examples used to verify both criteria. So the answer is you should really use different projects, for instance, or documents to fulfill those criteria, right? So if you are talking about, let's say you work at Facebook and you work on project A and project B, so you want to decide like which project would go where, if you really want to use the work project for mandatory as well, and then use a separate project for the third criteria. That being said, I usually try to advise people and encourage them to use external evidence for the mandatory criteria, external proof of recognition, not use just internal projects that nobody has heard of outside the company. If there are publications about the projects in the media and there are awards or whatever, then they can be used as well. But just be aware that it doesn't it's not always the strongest document that you can use, although it can be used, of course. Was there anything else that I skipped? Okay, so was this question: test automation engineer with over 10 years of experience, currently working in a product-based company in London. I have a master's degree in cybersecurity and a few certifications. So can you apply? Again, it depends on whether you can meet the criteria, right? So you can continue watching this webinar, and then if you're interested, you can get in touch with me, and we can talk about your eligibility and evaluate your chances together. Yeah, so product innovation can be proven via media release, but how it proves I was involved other than reference letters, definitely. I've helped people who didn't have any media releases that mention their name, which is quite common if you're a software engineer and you work on something, right? So in those cases, the way to prove it would be to have letters that point to you working on it, to you driving the innovation. And then sometimes people also show various visual artifacts that prove that they worked on those things like screenshots from GitHub and summaries of their work, right? Where it's very important, technician doesn't really need to see like the code that you wrote, they just need to see that you worked on it, right? So you can work within that. More general questions, I do encourage you to watch my channel. I have a whole webinar, a whole playlist of videos on all the criteria and all the documents. I think you'll find them very useful. So there was a question about Art Council. I'm not entirely sure what the current waiting times for the council are, so I would encourage you to just check and see what it looks like. With technician, yeah, it has been their typical timeline that they announce is 8 weeks, although usually it happens faster. Does volunteering for an indie game project count? According to the official Global Talent Visa webpage, game development is included in tech domain. Yes, definitely. People in game dev apply for the visa and get it. I think here the question is, how will you show that your volunteering helped advance the industry, and how did it help the industry grow, right? So to show impact, to show contribution, to show commitment, I think is really key here as well. Should your contributions be within your occupation, or it doesn't matter as long as it in tech? I guess it means whether you can, if you do something other than your main specialty. Yeah, definitely. It has to be in tech, and you have to show. It's very important to show commitment that you have been doing this for a while. That you haven't started doing it just recently for the sake of the visa, which is what they really don't like. And then to show the impact that you're having on the industry, right? So this I think is even more important than the specific skills that you use to do something. But I'm curious to hear, Yana, what is the example that you're thinking of? Maybe I can answer it better. But also, yeah, really sorry if I answer something not precisely because I don't have all the information. I try to give like the most generic guidance possible, but there are limits to what I can do because it's a one-way thing that we do here. All right, so yeah, I want to take a short break here before we talk about the optional criteria. You can feel free to drop your questions in the chat, and please hang on, please don't drop off. There, as I said, there will be a nice little bonus towards the end for those who are patient. Yeah, so see you in a few minutes. Hey everyone, I'm back. I see some people dropped off. Yeah, so where were we? Do we have any more new questions? Dziękuję. Proszę. All right, so yeah, let's move on to the third criteria. So the third one is the one that a lot of people choose. I would say that it's probably also, please let me know if nothing broke while I was away, and you can still hear me. So yeah, so the third criteria is one that everybody uses pretty much. So this one is about whether you, as an employee or founder, were able to drive growth by your contributions, as you know, in your role. So what it means in practice is that whether you are, if you're working in a company, a product-led company, it's very important for this criteria that it's product-led. Whether you were able to do something meaningful for the business metrics and the growth of the company, right? So in my experience, I've maybe once I saw somebody got rejected on this criteria where they worked at a product company, but technician wasn't convinced that they actually drove the growth. And it was a very specific case with a quite a rare specialty of the person had. So generally for technical or business candidates, it's quite an easy criteria to meet. Here, like, how do you prove it? So I have some things that you can use to prove that you actually worked on this thing, which, you know, for various roles are different. So people get screenshots of their GitHub contributions, of their commits. Again, you are very encouraged to obfuscate as much as reasonable from there. They just want to see that you worked on this thing. Architecture diagrams, again, like, they don't really care to learn the secrets of your trade, but they want to see that you worked on this. Product designs as well, and then any kind of documents that show the business impact of your work in numbers, right? So this can be revenue, monthly active users growth, time, money saved for the company, leads generated, deal size increased, blah blah blah. Like every kind of business metric that you can come up with can potentially be used. And then a lot of people use reference letters for the third criteria as well. They have to be different from the required letters of recommendation, so please don't confuse them. These are separate things. We'll talk about letters of recommendation in a bit, but these are separate letters. They are a little bit different. They look a bit different. They are usually shorter. They focus on different things, but they're still letters, and you can't just rely on them down this criteria. Very important. If you remember one thing from this, uh, okay, you have to remember more than one thing from this, but it's very important. You can't just use letters. There is, like, you know, there was a certain trend, let's just say that, to just build the whole application on letters. It's no longer works. It hasn't worked for a while. So make sure that you have something else rather than letters, and generally try to have an evidence piece that is balanced, that has external proof, screenshots, links, something, and a letter from somebody who is who meets the requirements of technician for recommendation letter authors as well. Hopefully this makes sense. Do you think you have do you have any ideas of what you can use from the previous slide? Whether you already have ideas for what kind of projects you can submit there. I would say my mental model for this criteria is, if you have been doing something meaningful in your work where you were going above and beyond your requirements of your job, this is where this is what you can do for this criteria. This is what you can use for this criteria. So if you were just dragging Jira tickets down the Jira board to the right and weren't really doing anything significant, you weren't really contributing or being a leader in any capacity, then this is potentially not an appropriate project or to use for this criteria. They want to see something, some signal of you going above and beyond, being a little more energetic than other people and doing more than like a regular person would do in your role. So kind of being having some sort of initiative and drive to do things at the company can help you with this criteria. But they have to see that you were the person driving the growth, right? That you were instrumental in it. If they're not convinced, they can reject you. Or they can say that, oh, nothing special happened. So very important that you kind of understand where you are in this spectrum. So good question. If technician doesn't like LinkedIn articles, is it still worth doing them for visa purposes, or really don't waste the energy? So for me, I think it's a complex question, really, but it's a good question. Um, I think for the reasons of growing a personal brand, and this is me talking just as a somebody who's interested in personal branding and also just experience with career coaching and changing jobs. Like it's really good to have a personal brand, to have recognition. And I've coached people who use their very well developed LinkedIn profiles as part of their application, right? So they were able to mention somewhere in a document that I have, a large following, like I'm one of the top experts in the. Yeah, this is the next question. Oh, sorry, I meant different one. So LinkedIn flags you as an expert if you contribute to collaborative articles. So people have used them as like proof of their personal brand, right? So it's something that you can potentially mention. And definitely, if you can develop your LinkedIn profile without sacrificing other things, then you can do that. Realistically, though, I think you have to choose. You have to be very strategic about what you do if you want to increase your chances, right? You can't do everything. So if your time is limited, I would focus on things that will definitely count. Things like publications in moderated, respected platforms, and then public talks at conferences that are well regarded in your field where you are a keynote speaker. So if you can focus on those things, that would be much better. But as a massive LinkedIn fan, I would say that growing your LinkedIn is always a good idea and will definitely help you in many ways. In some, maybe not very intuitive ways. So maybe you'd be able to get speaking engagements through LinkedIn, right? So it's an interesting question, but if you have time, definitely grow your LinkedIn. Okay, so yeah, there was questions about 5-year limit. We've answered this. I've answered this earlier on. Just the application should focus on the last 5 years. The idea is that if you're applying for global talent recognition, you should have enough achievements in the last 5 years to focus on, right? So hopefully you can find something that is a bit more recent and relevant, right? So yeah, proofs of development criteria might overlap with proofs of mandatory criteria. Exactly. So I guess you mean the second criteria overlaps with mandatory. Yes, it does. So what happened in the past? If you look at the guide, you would see that a lot of the evidences that the guide mentions they actually overlap, right? So they have the same evidence that you can use for both. Um, what happened in the past is that you could actually reuse the evidences, and I mean, people did that. It's not like sometimes it was appropriate, sometimes it wasn't. So, but also there is a tendency to overuse it and to use each document for each criteria, which kind of made the whole application look a bit insane. And then there was this new rule by Tech Nation that you can't reuse documents. And now there is a very clear understanding that if you have a document that fits under two criteria, you have to decide where it fits better. And it might feel like it's a very important distinction, but also it kind of isn't. You can rearrange documents as you move along the preparation. I encourage people to create a mind map, just to do like a brainstorm of everything they have, and then they can decide like which document goes where, which evidence, which criteria needs more support, right? So it's for me, it's very easy to determine like where things fit because I have seen so many evidences and so many documents at this point. But yeah, you're definitely right. It's a bit confusing. Alrighty, and then the last criteria, the academic one. Very curious to hear whether anybody listening to this and watching this live or a recording is going to use the academic criteria. Um, so this is for people with academic background. So this is for people who have papers published in peer-reviewed journals, presentations done at peer-reviewed conferences, awards for academic work, and also, of course, letters from academic expert, all related to digital technology, right? It can't be just any field, right? So remember, it has to be digital technology. All of it has to be digital technology. In my experience, I have helped some people with academic backgrounds, but it's quite rare. A lot of my clients have been software engineers, self-taught like me. So this is a criteria that I randomly work with, but very curious if somebody here has some academic background. Okay, there is another guest in the show. Yeah, so yeah, let me know who is there anybody who plans to use academic criteria or academic experiences? Okay, so there is a question, how much do I charge for a call? So it depends on what kind of call and what kind of package there is. So there will be a nice announcement about a discount in a bit. I'll post a link to my most basic call and like introductory call that I do in the chat. But in a bit, I will announce at limited time offer for a discount on this call. So if you're interested, you can either wait or you can just bookmark the live stream and go back to it and rewatch it later. What else? I have just one speaking engagement with more than 100 attendees. Can this stand as my speaking engagement evidence? So the question, again, very hard to answer without looking at the rest. So yes, sometimes people have just one speaking engagement and they use it. A lot depends on like what kind of event this was, the context of it, what your talk was about, and things like that, right? So again, very hard to answer without looking at the specifics of it. But even if I had the specifics, it's still hard to say whether it's enough to get the visa. I guess that's the question that everybody is worried about. Is it enough? And to say whether it's enough, I have to see what else is there. In the past, I've had clients who had nothing, like no external profile, nothing. And they were able to get endorsed. And now, end of 2023, it's really hard to get endorsed without public profile and speeches and publications and media recognition and all of that stuff. So, yeah, it depends. I have publications, but they're not in tag. Although I use this material for doing my job, can I build a bridge of how it's related to my current job and use it in my application? What are the publications about, and can you provide more details? Really hard to answer without it. Yeah, I've shared the link to my discovery call. So my website is bittlhope.com /talent is where you would see all of my services. And discovery is one of them, the cheapest one, the introductory one, probably the most popular one that I do. No difference really. I mean, in terms of evidence, the evidence is the same for all specialties. I mean, obviously, it's not the same for all specialties, but the requirements are similar. So it really mostly depends on the evidence, not on your profession. So yeah, what else do you need? So you also need the letters of recommendation. It's three with an asterisk, but basically there are three required letters that you have to submit, and then usually you would have more letters. You would have reference letters that support various criteria, as I mentioned. So in my coaching practice, I've had a client who actually submitted 11 letters in total. Some people would have 5, 6 letters in total. So there would be like three big letters that they use, maybe four, and then they would have shorter letters that are combined with other evidences. So it really depends on the case and the situation, but the letters are they're not enough alone, but also you can't really get a visa without the letters, right? So very important, and how you choose the experts and like what is written in the letters. I obviously can't cover all of this in this call, but um, super important part of the application. I'll talk about the mistakes and the ways to get rejected in a bit, and some of it will be covered actually. Yeah, so here, if you are just preparing for applying for the visa, please write down a list of three experts that you could ask for letters of recommendation. Obviously, don't share it, but I wanted to get you thinking about it, and maybe you have questions already, like, can I use this and that person for the visa application. So you can ask in chat, and I'll just take 1 second and let the cat out into the garden because she really has to go. All right, I don't see any questions in regards to letters, but usually there are a lot of them. um all right, interesting question. Outside of my work, I currently teach data engineering free in the UK. I also mentor with 3 underrepresented groups, and also as a fellow at Zinc Accelerators program. Can I use this for OC2? Definitely sounds like something that would be applicable. So you're teaching data engineering, which is very much OC2 material. You mentor within 3 UK underrepresented groups. Question: what does this mentoring look like? Does the program have selection criteria for mentors? Does it have an organized curriculum? If so, then yes, um, it can be used potentially. And as a fellow at Zinc Accelerators, not sure what the fellow does there, so I would need to clarify. But if it's a mentor, then potentially it can be used as well. But also it can be reframed as advising startups, I guess would be a good term, if I'm correct. But sounds quite promising for the second criteria. Oh, that's actually a good question from Simeon. So, is it better to use recommendation letters from your former managers, or seek someone who you don't know personally but with a better reputation? So, the thing about experts is that they have to explain how they know your work in detail for at least 12 months, which is a mouthful, but very important. So, in the letter of recommendation, they will have to explain how they know your work for at least 12 months, and they will have to talk about your work in detail, right? So if this is somebody, I don't see how you can ask somebody you don't know personally for this. um, I believe that in the past, like a couple of years ago, people were doing this kind of thing where they asked like some random people they didn't know for letters of recommendation, but gradually the rules have been tightened. So now it's important that this person knows you. They don't necessarily have to work with you in the same company, right? But they have to explain how they know this much about you and your achievements, right? And I've seen this done very beautifully in letters, but it works well when, for instance, you have a nice public profile and the person writing about you, they follow your work, they follow your open source, they follow your articles, they follow your talks, or maybe they uh, asked you to speak at their event and they participated, they attended the event, and then they also, I don't know, read your book or whatever. So you have to explain how they know of this stuff and also why they think that you are worthy of this great visa. So the question is there, but in terms of, whether you can get managers, you can't get letters from managers or colleagues. They have to be removed from you, at least by one level. So make sure that you don't have any direct managers recommending you. It's also explicitly forbidden by the guide. As for the guide, just make sure that you always follow the guide. You double check it before you apply. You don't rely on anybody's advice that is recorded somewhere, because it can go out of date. Obviously, if you work with me, then I'm expected to provide you up-to-date information. But if it's a webinar or something like this, those things can change. But yeah, everything that is in the guide, it has to be followed. It's not a nice to have. If it's there, you have to do it. If there are 3 bullet points, you have to have 3 bullet points. And just make sure not to break the rules. I think you'll be better off than a lot of applicants who apply on their own and don't follow the rules at all. Okay, so can letters be from non-tech experts, product managers, marketing managers, producers? So again, it depends on the specialty of the person, like what they will be talking about in the letters. I think sometimes we've done we had like interesting cases where the candidate would be an engineer and they would have a lot of letters from CTOs and technical people, but then there will be like one letter from a PM that would be interesting and kind of show the person from a different angle and show how they are very involved in product decisions or something like this. So it can definitely work. The question is more about can you say that this person writing the letter is a global talent themselves? Are they a leader in tech? And then what will they talk about? So definitely, if you're a business applicant, then you can get a letter from a business person. And or from a technical person, right, who can talk about business stuff. It just has to be something that they're comfortable writing about, basically. So yeah, what if you spend just 5 months at a job and you've had significant impact? The thing is that the 12 months rule applies to all evidences, right? So that's the tricky part. Um, would the person writing about you be able to say that they have known your work for at least 12 months? If so, then they can talk about your work during the 12 months and then your work during the last 5 months and the impact. But otherwise, it's easy to just break this rule and then kind of the whole thing it's not will not be considered, right? If you break a rule. So the way it works is that if you submit documents and like one of them breaks through the rule, it doesn't mean that you necessarily like get rejected straight out, but it means that this evidence piece might not be considered, and then depending on the rest of the evidences, the whole case might fall apart, or it might not if the rest of the stuff is good. So I've seen both things happen. So I've seen documents where cases where one document maybe is kind of on the edge of breaking some rule, and then the case works on its in totality, then it's good. Sometimes you would see somebody get rejected if they break some rule, just one rule, right? So it really depends, and I advise people to be careful and just follow the guide. So the social profile of your expert is not in English. So it also happens, but usually you explain yourself why you think this person is a global leader, or like a digital technology leader, right? There is no requirement that they're like necessarily given talks in English. Um, you just need to explain in their letter of recommendation, they would explain why they're a leader, like what they have done, what their contributions are, and it usually works very well. So if they're a leader in your country, then they would potentially be a good recommender. All right, so the CV. Really not quite sure what I was going to talk about the CV. I think the biggest takeaway here is that you should not use your regular CV. For most cases, you need to adjust it and you need to make it a little bit more tailored to the application for the visa. So the CV has to include some things that are sometimes or normally not put in the CV. So it has to have the section for mentoring, the section for public talks, for publications, for open source, community awards, and basically all of those things that we have discussed through the criteria, right? All of those things that you have done, they should be in your CV as well. So your CV will be the second document that they read after the personal statement. So you have to impress the assessor. You have 3 pages, which is a lot. It's not the one pager that is recommended sometimes. So it's 3 pages. You have a lot of space. You can put in everything that you want them to see very briefly, obviously. So you would talk about your career achievements, but then also about your out of work achievements. You should not focus too much about your like specific skills or like listing all of the programming language that you know. If you don't have space, it's okay. Focus on what makes you a global leader and put this in your application, right? So it should be like a little bit the general like vibe of the CV is very different from normal job search. So if you look at your CV and it feels like you're looking for a job and you're asking technician for a job, then probably you haven't done it quite well. So I review quite a lot of documents for before people apply, and this is the common refrain that just people use their old CV and hope that it will work, but usually it's not there, right? So it has to be rewritten for the global talent visa. Yeah, if you feel like you can share your biggest professional achievement in chat. If not, that's totally fine. You can just write it for yourself, just to make sure that your biggest achievements they end up on your CV. And the personal statement, as I mentioned, it's the first document that they will read. In Technician Guide, you can see what things they expect to see there. I would say that the point of that personal statement is to try to fill in the gaps in your application, to tell your story, to sell your story to the assessor. You have 1,000 words, which is a lot, to really make a very strong impression on the assessor. They should open the CV, should open the personal statement, just read it very quickly, and then they would go to the CV, then the 3 letters of recommendation. And at that point, by that point, my goal as a coach is to make sure that they are sufficiently impressed by you and they're convinced that they are looking at a global talent or a promising leader. And just want to emphasize how important the 5 documents are, how important the personal statement is really. I can't overestimate the importance of it. I usually advise people to write it last. There is another approach to write it first. I do find that it helps to have like an idea or like a draft of it at first. But then once you have the rest of the application, you can make sure that your personal statement really highlights the most important things that you have in your whole application very briefly and ties everything together. I want to be clear after reading your personal statement what criteria you have chosen, why you meet them, why you think you're a leader, and also what you will do for the UK, because it's very much about what you will do for the country and how you will save the economy. So you have to explain like why you need this visa and what you will do with it very specifically. So you should not think that this statement is like it's called personal, right? But um, think about it in a kind of British sort of way. They're not really interested in your like personal story or like your deepest dreams and aspirations when it comes to London. Um, it's more about your potential benefit to the economy. That's about it. I think it's pretty straightforward, really, if you think about it in this respect. Very curious. What is your main reason to want to get the global talent visa or to come to the UK if you're outside? Very curious, like what interests you, why you decided to attend this webinar, like why you want to get it. What is your biggest reason? Like, what is your dream and goal that you want to achieve with it? I'll talk a bit about the process very briefly. You can find it on the Technation guide as well. So, like, what is the process? How do you get the visa? What is it like, right? So, the first step is applying for endorsement. So, you gather your documents. You have the 15 documents that you prepare, up to 15 documents. Obviously, after consulting the Technation visa guide, you apply for the endorsement from technician. You wait for the endorsement. You get a letter from home office, advising you whether you have been endorsed or not within approximately 8 weeks. It has been faster lately, but this will change. So I would consult. I would advise you to consult forums or chats to see like what is the current wait time, but that's the deadline that they give. And then if you get endorsed, then you move over to stage 2, which is the process of actually getting the visa, which is the immigration stage where I don't advise. So that's kind of the optimistic scenario. And then if you don't get endorsed, which is unfortunately quite common, you have a couple of options. You can either apply for a review of the decision. I also help people with the appeals. It's um, it's an interesting process where sometimes there is a chance to appeal, and there is a chance to get the endorsement. Sometimes it's just not really worth doing it. Usually, it's if the candidate has time, then it might be worth appealing. It's free. You will get another review. You will get new information. Sometimes people who are on a very, very tight schedule, they choose to reassemble their documents and just submit a fresh application. Depends on your situation, really. And yeah, then you can reapply with new documents or choose a different visa route in some cases as well. So yeah, next part is talking about the top mistakes that can cost you the visa. And very curious to hear what you wrote in the chat. Let me see. And give me another second to you guess that let the cat back. Very cool. So the reason to get the visa is the freedom to do any job or to be self-employed. I can totally relate to this. And another question. On being an employee of a company, I work at a leading cloud provider, helping customers build cloud data solutions as a customer engineer. Besides high salary, how best can I demonstrate strong OC1? So OC1 is about innovation. So yeah, high salary doesn't really prove innovation. So I do encourage you to scroll back and watch my section where I talked about the OC1. It was maybe, I don't know, 40 minutes ago or something like this. And also I have a bunch of videos on my channel about innovation. I do encourage you to consult that. All right, let's talk about the mistakes that can cost you the visa. As I said before, I actually have a whole live webinar about rejections. I will drop a link to it in the chat. It was, I think, about 2 hours long, where I talk specifically about the rejection reasons. So I very much encourage you to watch it. There will be a lot more context than I will get into today, because if I do it today as well, then the webinar will be 4 hours long, and I find it hard to talk even at this point, 2 hours in. So very much encourage you to watch it. If you have questions after watching, you can ask in the comments. I try to answer them as much as I can. Or as I said, if you got rejected already, unfortunately, you can come to me for help with rejections as well. So when it comes to letters, there are a couple of ways you can make a mistake. So first of all, who writes the letter, and then the content. So about the who writes the letter, I think I've covered a lot of it. So, choosing somebody who doesn't know you or your work for at least 12 months is, one thing. Then choosing somebody who is not really an expert in digital technology. Choosing somebody from like a different field altogether, or somebody who is just experienced only in consulting or in like various other industries. So that's usually a problem. Or having somebody who's your direct manager or your colleague, right? So be aware of those things. They're mostly in the guide, but still I think a lot of people make this mistake. And then sometimes it's just not choosing somebody impressive enough, sort of. If you are trying to decide whether somebody is a good candidate, just ask yourself whether this person would be able to get this visa. If they wouldn't, then potentially it's not the best candidate for the role of the letter author. And then the content, I think, again, here, like what sometimes people do is they are not really sure what to put in the letters. I think it's very important to cover like the bullet points and the requirements that the technician guide has for letters, to have all of those required things in, but also to make sure that the letter of recommendation that you have really talks about why you are a global talent, why you are a leading talent in the field or a promising leader. It should not just read that you are like a good employee and you're efficient and you do your job well. Like nobody is really interested in that. Nobody cares. It's kind of expected, right? That if you're applying for skilled worker visa, if you're getting skilled worker visa, that's kind of the expectation that you have a job and you do it well and you got through the interview process and your employer gives you a visa. If you're applying for global talent, it has to be something more. The expectation is higher, the visa is better. So you have to show that you are on a different level, sort of, than most people, right? So the visa is still quite niche and very few people still get it proportionally to how many people move to the UK on the skilled worker visa. So just be aware of it, and if you get a letter from the expert, just make sure that it really talks about you as a global leader, and it should be using strong words, but also telling strong stories about you. So you should have some achievements behind you that they can convincingly talk about. So there are ways to shape your experience and present it the way a technician wants. I help people kind of tell the story in a way that resonates with what technician expects and what they hope to see, but still the foundations, they have to be there, right? So this is where, again, discovery session comes in, where we can at least like get a sense of what you have done, whether it would be enough and acceptable level, right? Okay, so Sadiq mentioned mistake not mapping the right evidence to each criteria. Definitely, I actually have a slide about it, so that's a good point. It's very important to understand which criteria you have chosen, like which document meets which criteria. You have to choose the criteria. If I work with you, we will choose the criteria up front, so you will know what you're preparing, right? So that's also very important. For mandatory, people just don't show leadership, they don't prove it, they just submit a couple of projects from work and hope that it's enough. It really isn't at this point. You have to show external recognition, you have to show public talks, conferences, publications, awards, all of that stuff that I mentioned. I think just kind of go back to the part of the webinar where I talked about the mandatory, like you have to have those things, like not all of them, but at least some of them. It's very hard to prove leadership otherwise. Then, submitting random financial documents to prove leadership. It doesn't work. Your salary, as I said, doesn't really prove you are a leader. So don't hope that you can submit your salary documents and just be endorsed. It doesn't work anymore. I know some people still try to do it. Just don't do it. Try to find something better. If you don't have it, like, yes, you can try to apply, but don't hope that salary will just carry the whole case. For OC1, it's failing to explain innovation. I think it's pretty straightforward. People come to me with rejection sometimes when they apply on their own or with agencies or lawyers, and they say like, "Hey, I've proven innovation," but they say they don't see it. And then I look at the documents and it's not explained. Like, I don't see what is the innovation there. You can't just assume that if you're talking about something that is innovative, that technician assessor will also see it. You should not expect that. You should explain the innovation in simple terms so that anybody can understand them. And you can just make a convincing case that whatever you built was really an innovation. So uh, just keep this in mind. Keep the user experience in mind. So the user will be the technician assessor. Make sure they can easily grasp the idea that you're trying to prove is innovative, and also have external proof. OC2 with external work, very often people can't show or don't show impact on the industry through their work. So they just say, I've done this volunteering, but then the technician says, so what? Like, what is the impact of it? Um, Here, hard to give generic advice, but we'll be happy to brainstorm with you specifically with your specific examples. Like, what is your um, impact and what is the recognition that you have for your work, right? For your volunteering. Very often there are ways to show it. Sometimes there aren't, but usually we can think of something. For the third criteria, only using letters, I think is a big one. It applies to all the criteria. Just, I've talked about this at length today, so just don't rely on letters, have something else. Product experience, very important. You have to explain that your work experience is actually product experience. It's not consulting, or sometimes they would say, oh, it's you worked in a bank, you worked in I don't know, pizza delivery or something like this. And you have to explain why this wasn't really a pizza delivery, but it was actually a tech company, a product company that has a big R&D department, but also that delivers pizza. So make sure that it's clear that your company is product and you worked on product, because sometimes it's just not obvious, right? So it might very well be that your company is mainly making money from tech solutions, but it might not look like this from the outside. So make sure that it's very clear to anybody who is reading this. Then being too shy, I think, is another thing where people make a mistake. They're just, it's very hard to praise yourself or have others praise you, but it's really not a place to be shy. So you have to be your own advocate. It's very hard to do for people from a lot of cultures where you are taught to be very modest and not brag about yourself, not talk about yourself. I grew up in the same culture, but gradually I've learned to overcome it. But also I think it's much easier for me to praise other people and help them praise themselves. So I think this is what makes me so good at this. I really like to highlight people's achievements and talk about them and find a way to sell their story when they're really too shy or too self-conscious to do it. Imposter syndrome is a big obstacle in this. Being too high context is another thing. What it means is that sometimes people talk about their achievements assuming that the person reading this shares the same context and the same knowledge with them, but they probably don't. So if you are talking about some things that only a specialist in the field would know, you should not expect the technician assessor also like understand it and get it. You should get somebody with like some understanding of tech to read the document that you have written and ask them to summarize what you have written. If they can't, then probably it's too high context for this visa. So make sure that you follow this, explain it like on five guidance up to a point, obviously. The CV I've already covered. Just don't use your existing CV. Make sure that your CV fits the level of excellence that technician expects. The point of the personal statement, sometimes people really think that a personal statement is a place to talk about their, I don't know, childhood dream of walking the streets of London in the November mist, which is really not that enjoyable. But anyway, like that's not what they're looking for in the personal statement. As I said, it's more about your goals, your like concrete plan, short term, long term, what you're gonna do for the country, how you plan to use the visa, what your contribution will be, and all of that stuff. 3-page rule. Each document has to be 3 pages. People, it's I think everybody has been talking about this, but still people try to ignore it and kind of circumvent it. Don't do it. Just follow the 3 pages. I know it's hard to fit in everything on three pages, but that's the point of the restriction, right? Um, the constraint is there to help you choose the most important things. So just do your best to focus to put everything in the 3 pages. And it doesn't mean that you should use really, really tiny font or remove your margins or squash your pictures so that they're like this and it's all stretched. No. Fitting into 3 pages means that you have to um, just be very like it has to be the font has to be readable. There has to be margin, like normal margin. It has to look like a normal document, but you have to choose what to put on it, right? So I help with this as well. And it's very hard for people, for everybody. It was very hard for me as well, but you have to do it. Like you don't ignore the rule. They're there for a reason. So um, just follow them and do your best to choose the most important parts of your experience. So yeah, not having a consistent story is a big problem. Sometimes the application is kind of all over the place. Like one letter kind of tells one story, and then the other letter a different story. I mean, obviously they will talk about different angles of your experience, but it still has to like all of it holistically has to read, you know, to make sense together, right? So things have to match the dates on letters in LinkedIn, CV. Like all of it has to be consistent. Like sometimes people make mistakes and then they're mentioned in their rejections with dates. Sometimes people try to hide something and then they don't do a good job of it. Um, so just be very consistent and clear with the dates because you don't want technician to think that you're hiding something. Um, and you don't want them to become suspicious or start checking everything, and then like the whole thing just falls apart, and it's not good for anybody. um, my mental models for success, I think like this, I had this slide from my earlier webinar that no achievement is too small. I'm not sure like how much I agree with it anymore. I think I still agree with it. So, but we have to evaluate still the achievement. So when I say no achievement is too small, I mean that if you come to me for a consultation, just mention everything that you have, and we can determine whether it's good enough. So don't dismiss something just because you think that it's not important. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but it's very important to consider, to discuss it at least, right? Um, just we can discuss it together and see whether it's relevant or not. But if you don't write it down, you don't think about it, then there is no chance of using it ever, right? So be very um, just be kinder to yourself. When you're evaluating your life and your achievements, maybe there is much more there than you think. What else? People ask me, should I apply? Am I eligible? And I think a lot of people kind of hope that somebody or like an expert or webinar or some sort of online algorithm will tell them whether they are eligible, whether they can apply or not. I don't think that you really need anyone's permission to apply. I think it's very much about gathering information, talking to a few people who are qualified and who are knowledgeable. I do believe at this point in paying people for advice, because then the person who is given advice is responsible by their reputation and um, their good name for giving you good information and karma as well. And they will evaluate your experience holistically and give you some information. You can talk to a couple of people who will be interested in giving you, this assessment. And then ultimately, I think the decision is still always yours. So in my experience, I've had a case where initially I was very skeptical that there was enough material for a successful case, but then the candidate just, they were very willing to try and they were really determined to make it work and make it happen. And I was also open to try a very challenging case, and we made it work. The person got the visa, and it's just, I think, amazing. And I'm 100% sure that in a lot of cases, people with experiences like this, they would be told that they are not eligible at all, and then it turns out that they are. So strange things happen in this world of endorsement. That's, I think, all I can say on that. And about getting the visa, I think some people are a bit confused about like how complex this process is, and then I think it's very easy to get annoyed at like how much consultants and lawyers charge for helping. I would say that when I was preparing my own application, I also didn't even consider paying somebody to help me because it did seem very expensive. But then, with the benefit of hindsight, I would say that yes, I saved money, but I did spend a lot more time than I should have. And also, I would say that there was a lot of stress and uncertainty in this for me, where I would have a document and I wasn't entirely sure whether this is good enough, whether this is valuable or not. And like in my personal opinion, it worked out great for me because I got all of this experience myself, and I had to read all of the forums that existed at that point, like all of the YouTube videos. Like I've watched and read everything I could find to learn, and this helped me to become an efficient visa coach. But I think for most people who don't plan to help others do this and don't need all of this information, it's just not the most efficient way to spend time to do all of this research. So yeah, as I said, like you don't have to do it alone, and I very much encourage people to think whether, as the previous slide says, like the visa takes time or money or both. Like you will always get in this visa, you will always pay in some way for the visa. If you do it alone, you will likely spend a lot of time researching, and time is money. Obviously, you might get rejected, which I think is easier to do than if you work with somebody who is qualified to help. So then, again, you can reapply, but the time that you spent, you cannot get back. And then, even if you work with a coach, I think you have to be prepared to also invest your own time. So I think time is probably not, or both. Like time is always there. Like you can't delegate this process to somebody else completely. It usually doesn't work that well. So yeah, this is my website where you can find more information about me, all of my testimonials, webinars, and the services that I provide. You can go there, check it out. If you have questions, you can reach to me on LinkedIn. This is a little disclaimer that I always have, that I'm not associated with technician and I'm not an immigration advisor or solicitor, and I only coach on the stage 1 for the UK Global Talent Visa. But I'll be happy to suggest, you to seek help of registered immigration solicitors if you need help with any immigration matters in the UK. So why people work with me? I think a lot of it comes with my experience. So I have experience working in big tech companies, and now I run a startup. So I do have insights into both the technical aspects of all of it, since I worked as a software engineer, but also more business side of things, since my role as a DevRel was very much business focused as well, not only technical. Um, Also, my skills, I think, put me aside because of of the things that I went through. Being a serial immigrant, having lived in a bunch of countries, also have an editing experience. So I did work as an editor and a journalist, which obviously helps me with reviewing documents and helping you shape your story. So I think experience in journalism really helps. I also wrote and published my own book, and I have achieved success as a blogger on YouTube, LinkedIn, and other platforms. So it means that I do understand personal branding, and I can advise you on ways to increase your personal brand and connect with bloggers and like how this world works. I can provide some advice as well. Um, I also, as I said initially, I help everyone in tech. So not only technical candidates, but also business candidates as well. So this is not an exhaustive list. So I'll be happy to help you as well. I've also interviewed many people on my YouTube channel. I don't do that much of it anymore because I also work on my startup now. So, but you can still find all of those interviews on my channel. I think it's been around 15 live streams or something like this. But I've talked to a lot of people about their visa experience. So I've been able to gather a lot of perspectives and just various ideas of how people do this kind of thing. As I said, I went through the process myself, so I know the pain. I know the suffering that people go through, so I do emphasize with it. I know the questions that most people ask. I expect them, and I try to prevent them. I also would say that I really take each case personally and worry quite a lot about how it goes through. So I usually try to provide not only information support but also moral support, which I think is really important in this process. Sometimes you have too much information but you don't have the belief in yourself, which I'm very happy to provide. But also, to be honest, I don't try to upsell my clients the stuff that they don't need. Very often I tell people that unfortunately I don't see a way for them to get endorsed right now, and I give them advice on how to increase their chances at a later point. I'm not interested in um, I'm not interested in trying to get a lot of people into my pipeline and kind of have them there and give them false hopes. I'm not here for this. So with me you can expect honest feedback that might be not what you hoped for and might be hard to handle, but it will be honest and based on my experience talking to a lot of people and working with a bunch of people. So yeah, for my services, I will go through this very quickly and then I can answer some of your questions that probably appeared. So the basic session that I do, the introductory session, is called Discovery Session, where we talk about the eligibility that you have for the visa, dive into your experience. So it's 75 minutes, so it's kind of a longer call, but also it's still quite short for for doing what we do. So it's very intense, very fast paced. I have a framework of how I do it very quickly and efficiently. So we determine your chances for the visa. We talk about if you seem eligible and ready to start working on it, we move to the next session. If not, I will advise you on things that you can do to increase your chances, and we can create a roadmap or like a touch base point in time when we'll reconnect, and you can tell me, okay, so I've done this and that. Is it enough now? So can we start working on it now? And I have a lot of people in this kind of state now who consulted with me some time ago and then they come back. I'm actually coaching somebody who came for the discovery call in April and now they are ready to apply because they have done certain things that we've discussed that they would do. So it's an introductory call to get an idea of your chances, basically. And I record those calls so you can get the recording as well if you wish, obviously. Some reviews that you can also find on my website of people who have taken this session. A lot of them have, and I think a lot of the sessions end with me saying that the person is not eligible right now. But people are still happy to receive honest assessment. So I think that's also a very valuable session. There is also strategy. Again, all of those sessions are on my website, so you can read in detail. I recorded videos explaining what happens in them, so you can learn and decide on your own. But basically, this is a take-home exercise where you do a homework. We review them. I review them. Then we have a very long, intense call where we choose the criteria. We decide on the evidences. We create a roadmap to the visa. I suggest quick wins to increase your chances of success. We talk about the expert who will write your letters, and like a bunch of other stuff. There is just a lot that goes into it. And again, you get the recording if you wish to get it. Another review from one of my clients, Edith, who also had the strategy session with me and the review as well. And the review is basically the session or the package where if you're already at the point where you have worked on your evidences and you have drafts of them, you can come to me and I will review your documents as you work on them. So I have this iterative approach where I review documents, I share feedback on them with like detailed feedback on each document that you write, and then we have a call where we discuss what I've seen, and I share holistic feedback on the whole application and give more advice on how you can increase the chances of getting endorsed, right? So you will get advice on that as well, and more reviews from my clients. And there is the appeal section where, I review your rejection pro forma and the document you have submitted. We have a call where we discuss what's next, and then we either appeal or we proceed to apply with a fresh application. So again, you will get honest assessment of the situation. Never looking to upsell you or to convince you to work with me if I don't feel like I can help you get the visa. I'm very much interested in getting everybody endorsed who works with me. So yeah, and then exciting news, special offer for only 72 hours upcoming. I never do such big discounts, but I'm hoping that this might encourage some people who were on the fence about working with me or getting my consultation. So I'm offering 50% of my discovery package if you book it until December 1st, so the next 3 days. You can DM me on LinkedIn with saying that you were at the webinar. And it doesn't mean that you have to get the session within the 3 days, but you have to book it, right? So, but it can be obviously, next week or next month, or something reasonable like that. So yes, if you're interested, I think that's a good chance. It will only be active for 3 days. So get in touch if that's something that you're curious about. LinkedIn, I'm Nadia Zhuk on LinkedIn. That's a good way to get in touch with me. Also on YouTube, there is my email, so you can email me. My website, betelhub.com/talent, where you can find all of my services and review them and learn. But also, please note that the discount on discovery will only be active for 3 days, and then you will need to pay the full price. And follow me everywhere if you enjoyed this content. Let me check the questions. Okay, so to fit evidence in 3 pages, may I take URL screenshots with official translation more compact, like screenshotting only the main phrases, or put only one translation's improvement for all links? I struggle understanding it. What are official translations? So generally, just be reasonable when you're formulating your evidences. If you have screenshots, make them legible. Provide URLs for all the screenshots as well. But usually people use those screenshots sparingly, right? So they screenshot the most relevant parts of whatever they're trying to share. So just be reasonable and ask yourself whether the screenshot illustrates what I'm trying to prove or not, and then if it does, then it's probably good enough. Is it easy to switch from skilled worker to global talent visa? If you meet all the criteria, then yes. but generally it's not an easy visa to get. On the recommendation letters, most recommenders point only to the works done in the relationship only within the last 5 years, or if they can go back as 10 years. Yeah, as I said, like I always try to focus on the last 5 years. The most recent evidences, they make the application stronger, and just I think makes more sense. The question is whether whether there is nothing that you can talk about in the last 5 years, then it might not be the kind of strongest, right, evidence to focus on. So where can I book a slot for document review? So you can either add me on LinkedIn or just 1 second. So this is my email, nadia@bittlehop.com. It might be an easier way to get in touch. LinkedIn sometimes is weird and I don't get all of the messages that people send to me. So just send me an email. I will respond there, and we can decide when and how we can do a review slot. What else? Thank you for the webinar. Thank you for attending. I'll take a few more questions, so if you're still watching, you can shoot now. Technician asks official translation of external proofs like news articles about me. Yeah, so for translations, I do recommend working with a certified translator. I actually can recommend a translator from Russian. So if you email me, I can recommend somebody there who is familiar with the requirements of technician and knows how to format all of this stuff. But generally, translations are not counted towards the limit, right? So translation is one thing that is above this 3-page limit, right? So it's good that you clarified, because I was answering something completely different probably. Yep. So yeah, once again, here is the email. The website is bittlehop.com. If you like this webinar, just a small ask to like this, to leave a comment, to subscribe, and then if you found this valuable, share the videos with others. I do try to share as much information for free as possible so that people can prepare on their own who can't afford somebody else's services. So it will mean a lot to me if you do share the word and help others get prepared as well. Yeah, thank you so much for watching this. And one more comment. Thank you so much. This information was fantastic. Really glad to hear it. I do hope that you found this valuable. And I do hope that you can find my YouTube channel valuable as well. There is a lot there, like 50 live interviews with people who got the visa. Probably the biggest content of library of content on this that I've seen. Yeah, that's it. So I'll wrap up now. Hope you liked it and wish you a wonderful week ahead. Bye bye.